Colleagues, we have reached the scheduled time and we have already formed a quorum. We can get started. On the agenda today, we have two funding proposals submitted by the administration, and the first item was already listed in the agenda last time, but then we did not manage to scrutinize it. And the next one, a second one, is a new proposal. I'd like to remind members that if there is any direct or indirect pecuniary interest involved in the two items under discussion today, then in accordance with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure, the member should disclose the nature of the interest before he speaks. I'd also like to draw members' attention to Rule 84 regarding the voting where there is a direct pecuniary interest. Item 1. Head 703 Building, paper number PWSC 2014-1556, 13 GB, Liantang Heung Yuen Wai Boundary Control Point and associated works, construction of boundary control point buildings and associated facilities. The proposal is to upgrade 13 GB to Cat A on money of the day prices. The estimated cost would be $8.8119 billion. On the 5th of January 2015, the development panel was consulted on the proposal, and in accordance with members' requests, supplementary information was provided and is now enclosed in Annex 5 to the paper. Most members attending the meeting supported the administration's proposal to submit it to this subcommittee, and the relevant discussion issues have also been tabled before members. On the 27th of February, Dr. Kwok Kao-ki issued a letter to me, and the Secretary has already circulated the letter to members. Paper number PWSC 123/14-15, bracket 01. And when Dr. Kwok arrives, he can also elaborate on his request. With us today are from the Development Bureau, the Buildings Department, the CEDD representatives. So I'll now call upon the administration to walk us through the paper. Yes, Mr. Chen. As we have said, we'd like to seek members' support for upgrading the project, and the site covers an 18-hectare site providing trucks holding area and also a coach bus holding area, and visitors will be able to have immigration check there, and for trucks they would also be able to cross at the control point. And in January 2013, the Finance Committee already approved funding for 13 GB for the consultancy study, so that the consultants would be able to do the design, and the Buildings Department has already completed that work. And in August last year, a tendering exercise was put out, and in October last year, we already received the bids. And now we are conducting the final stage of vetting work, and with funding approval from the Council, we would strive to start it so that in 2018 the control point can be commissioned. And to tie in with the Liantang access road, in January this year, we also came to this subcommittee for approval. That is additional funding approval, but then it was not supported. But then the two projects will have to tie in with each other, and therefore we are looking at the proposal to increase funding, so that we can come back again for support. And that item is being looked into as to what needs to be done. But then at Liantang, as a strategic boundary control point for the long-term economic development of Hong Kong, to tie in with the eastern part of Guangdong's development, we believe that is a pressing project. Thank you. Okay, thank you. The floor is now open to members for questions. And for those who would like to express their views, please press the button in front of you. So Anyone who has questions? None? Yes, Gary Fan. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask the government representatives. Well, in your statement, you said that at the same PWSC meeting, a similar project was rejected. So I'd like to know what's the biggest difference this time when you resubmit the item. Are you thinking that you need to do it, or have you made any revision to the project? So can you explain that to us? Thank you, Chairman. Chairman? Yes? Yes, Mr. Chen, Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Fan, for your question. In fact, in January, as I referred to, it was another public works item. So it's 19 GB. So that's the infrastructure support and the construction of the access road, and is already underway. But then because we need supplementary funding, that's why we came to this council for further funding. But then this is a separate item for Liantang. This is the construction of the superstructure, and last time it was the civil engineering infrastructure project to tie in with the commissioning of Liantang. A series of works have to be undertaken, including the training of Shenzhen River, and also for the site formation works. Well, those have already received funding, and for those parts, they are already progressing rather smoothly. That's why last time at this subcommittee, the project which was rejected was the infrastructure works involving the access road, and is already underway, and we are trying to see how we can come back to this council for further support. So this is another item, and this is also the last in a series that we need to get funding from this council, other than the one requiring additional funding. So this is a separate item. Are there special reasons for you to segregate the two? Well, for major public works projects, this is a very common practice. For example, this item was undertaken by the Buildings Department for the building services, and then the CEDD earlier was responsible for the infrastructure works. There was an example about the training of the Shenzhen River, and it was done by the DSD, the Drainage Services Department. So different works departments would be responsible for different parts of the projects. Mr. Fan, any follow-up? Does any other member want to ask questions? If there are no further questions, then I'll put this item to a vote. For those in favor, please raise their hands. Mr. Albert Chen claims the division. The bell will ring for 5 minutes. So we'll put the matter to the vote, and that's Liantang Heung Yuen Wai boundary control point and associated works, construction of boundary control point buildings and associated facilities. Please proceed to vote. Before I announce the results, please check your votes. Voting is closed. And the results will be displayed. 26 present, 11 for, 14 against. I declare the motion negatived. We now move on to the second item on the agenda. Head 703 buildings, environmental hygiene, refuse collection points and cleaning depot, 6NR, reprovisioning of refuse collection point at Fuk Wa Street, Fuk Wing Street, Sham Street site, Sham Shui Po, Kowloon. With us today that is 6NR, upgrading it to Cat A at an estimated cost of $58.6 million in money of the day prices. And on the 11th of November 2014, the matter was put to consultation with the Health Services Panel. Many members indicated that they would support the administration's submission of the proposal to the PWSC. And after the meeting, supplementary information was furnished by the administration. Is now attached to Enclosure 3.
The gist of the deliberation of the panel has been tabled. Attending for this item, we have Professor Sophia Chan, Undersecretary for Food and Health, and also officials from the FEHD as well as the ASD. Should I ask Professor Sophia Chan, the Undersecretary, to take us through the paper? She has yet to arrive. I'm sorry. No, we don't need a debate. Can the clerk check where Professor Chan is now? It's up to her to decide her own arrival time. If the officials are not here, should we adjourn until she arrives?
Okay.
We don't know what is happening, but after all, the responsible officers are not at the council yet. We will adjourn, let's say, for 15 minutes, all right? We will resume at 11:15. But what if she arrives earlier? Well, no one can tell. Can the clerk or the secretariat please assist me in telling me when Professor Chan is going to arrive? Now she is here. Be careful, don't run. Okay, she's here. Very good. Take some time to settle down. We are particularly efficient today. It's not your fault. No, I should have arrived earlier. Okay. Undersecretary, have you settled down? Yes. Well, we can give you a minute. Catch your breath. Do you need 30 seconds? No, okay. Undersecretary, now I'd like to ask you to briefly take us through PWSC 2014-15-57, recommending the upgrading of 6NR to Cat A. This is about the reprovisioning of refuse collection point at Fuk Wa Street, Fuk Wing Street, Sham Street site in Sham Shui Po. Okay, Professor Chan, your introduction, please. Yes, Chairman, members. the FEHD needs to vacate a temporary refuse collection point at Sham Street so that we can form a larger site at Fuk Wa Street, Fuk Wing Street, Sham Street for residential development and permanent in situ reprovisioning of the RCP. We hope the PWSC can support the reprovisioning of the RCP of FEHD. The justifications for this project are that we'd like to increase land supply for housing, and one of the measures is to rezone GIC sites into residential use. The Fuk Wa Street, Fuk Wing Street site is such a piece of land that can be used for housing. And next to it, we have a temporary RCP of the FEHD. It is called the FEHD Sham Street Temporary RCP. On the 15th of January 2013, the ASD rezoned the Fuk Wing Street, Fuk Wa Street, Sham Street site into residential use. The Sham Shui Po District Council was consulted. Because of views of the Sham Shui Po District Council, the government subsequently proposed to combine the temporary RCP site with the Fuk Wa Street, Fuk Wing Street site to form a larger development site, whereby a permanent RCP will be incorporated into the future development. We have to reprovision the RCP in situ because in the vicinity of the Sham Street temporary RCP, we have a lot of old buildings and tenement buildings which are not equipped with refuse rooms. So there is a certain demand for refuse collection services from residents in the vicinity. If we do not reprovision this temporary RCP in situ, residents in the vicinity will have to go farther to dispose of their refuse, and this will inconvenience residents, and refuse collection facilities in the same area will be under pressure. So we are proposing to build a permanent RCP which will be incorporated into the future development. This will expound or optimize development potential and better utilize scarce land resources. We understand that members of the District Council and members here are concerned that we are positioning an RCP and residential units in the same building, and how we can avoid causing nuisance to residents. That is why in the design we are going to do complementary work, and we will take a series of mitigation measures in order to reduce the nuisance that will be caused to residents in the vicinity. And there will be two aspects. One, the exit, the access roads, and also the drainage system. All that will be totally separated from the residential part, so this will reduce the nuisance. And also at the RCP, there will be modern facility, and also there will be air filtering measures so that untreated gas will not escape from the RCP. This is in enclosure 3. Also, in 2003, we told the District Council of these measures, and the Sham Shui Po District Council said that they would not oppose the reprovisioning proposal in principle. And we also consulted the FEH panel of the LegCo on the 11th of November 2014. This will cover 1,120 square meters, and it is about the same size as the present RCP. The future developer will be responsible for the design and construction of the permanent RCP, and it will be handed over to the FEHD upon completion for operation, management, and maintenance. We believe, according to the money of the day prices, we will need to put down a cost of $58.6 million. Depending on the land sale date and also the overall land use program, if the funding request is supported by the PWSC and FC, so depending on the land sale date, our initial estimate is that at the earliest, the permanent RCP can be completed in 2020. I urge the chairman and members to support this project. Members who have indicated that they would like to speak are, we have Mr. Albert Chan and others. Mr. Albert Chan, Chairman, I don't exactly know the site very well, but looking at the plan here with regard to pedestrian access and also vehicle access and exits, experience tells us that at certain car parks or newly completed parks, pedestrians and car parks usually share the same access, and there may be risks posed to pedestrians. I have always told the government that the pedestrian access and car park exit should be separated with a distance because the situation is very unsatisfactory. Secondly, I cannot see the air outlet of the RCP because it can cause a nuisance. It would be better if it faces Fuk Wa Street and the CLP station. I can't see this from the plan. I hope you will consider these factors at the time of detailed design. Professor Chan, thank you, Mr. Chan. The FEHD has looked at the situation in great depth. May I defer to AD of FEHD? Certainly. Thank you, Chairman. The egress and ingress of the permanent RCP to be built is proposed to face Fuk Wa Street, where we have telephone exchange buildings, and so the exit will be situated there. As for the car park exit, it will be up to the developer who will design that car park. Mr. Chan, can I supplement? No, I'm talking about safety. I don't object that it faces Fuk Wa Street, but I believe pedestrians and cars are going to use exits which are very close to each other, and I have seen that there were great risks posed. Can we have Ms. Wong? I'd like to supplement. Compared to the present temporary RCP, the permanent RCP will more or less use the same access, and we have got some statistics for the last 5 years with regard to the ingress and egress and also traffic conditions. I could say that there were actually no traffic accidents, save for 3 minor accidents, but that did not involve pedestrians or users. And also to enhance safety, the RCVs will go head in to the RCP, and there will be signals and alarms to remind pedestrians. Now, you are at the stage of design. Do you want somebody killed before you are going to do a good design? This is just common sense. If people are going to walk very close to the car park exit, well, if you're a driver, you will know. I am quite agitated with such designs. You say you have looked into the pedestrian access, and you say you cannot move it elsewhere after looking into the situation. That we can accept. But then sometimes people just walk down onto the ground floor, and then suddenly a car will be turning around him. So use some common sense. Don't situate pedestrians exits next to a car park exit. This is common sense. Do you want somebody killed before you will listen to us? Please do not be so bureaucratic and calcified. Look at the plan to see whether there can be better design and move the pedestrian exit a little away from the car park exit. Can you not apply common sense to the design? Thank you very much for the view. Maybe the ASD can supplement. We have looked at the pedestrian exit and also staff exit when we did the design. Maybe the ASD can reassure Mr. Chan. No, can the transport department answer this question? I don't want the ASD to say anything. Is this not about common sense? Well, we don't have the transport department here, but apply your brain. The Undersecretary. First of all, let me thank Mr. Chan. In fact, the PAS was trying to give you past figures. We already have an RCP there, even if we are going to move it a little away from the present site. So it is already there, but I think Mr. Chan has a point. And I believe at this stage of design, I think the Transport Department and the ASD will be availing themselves to that view, and we will take care of that at the design stage. Can you reply to this point at the FC? I don't want to hold up the project, but when we vote on the FC, we should vote on this item separately. Okay, you want to single this out item for voting, is that right? That will be recorded. Mr. Frankie Yik, the administration has helped them to have tailgates and also enlarge some tanks for RCVs. But then some people have told us that the RCVs would be filled to capacity before they reach the RCP, so the road surface would be contaminated. And I said then that at the RCPs, maybe you can allow them to drain out the leachate first. But then you said there was no space available. Now that we are going to have a new RCP, even if it is a reprovisioned one, I'd like to ask the Bureau or departments whether you would consider including such leachate collection so that before the RCVs are filled to capacity, they can go there and drain out the leachate first. Maybe I can ask the AD to let you know the latest situation. Mr. Lam. Thank you, Chairman. At present, the RCVs of the FEHD or contractors do have a sump tank, and they already have a tailgate. The leachate would be carried on the RCVs, and they would check that there is no leakage before they go in and out of the RCPs. Mr. Frankie Yik, I don't think you have answered my question. I'm not talking about the converted vehicles. I'm talking about the reprovisioned RCP, whether there is some space so that when RCVs are filled to capacity and they happen to pass by the RCP, can they come in and drain out the leachate so that there will be no leakage and contamination of our roads? Who will take the question? Undersecretary. This is a very initial stage.
In fact, one of the measures that will be put in place would be to segregate the wastewater or the sewage. I understand that Mr. Ik is concerned that the sewage can be drained away at certain location of the site. Well, when they do the detailed design, they will pay attention to this. I hope that you will consider it, because that's the feedback from the trade, because they don't want to pollute or contaminate the place. In fact, I can see that the chief architect of the ASD is here. So can you tell us whether you have taken that into consideration when you draft the plan? Well, in these conditions, we will be coming up with a specification of works, and we will take into account members' concerns to see if that could be incorporated. Well, will this item be affected by the future building development so that it might be an interactive situation, right? Well, for the future design of the RCP and the building, well, for the residential parts, they will be completely segregated, including the sewage system. So we will actively consider members' comments. Next, Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. According to my understanding, they are applying for $58.6 million for the design and operation cost. But then, in fact, this will be undertaken by the future developer. So in the paper, para 10 says that the administration will be reimbursing the future developer for the construction and design cost, but then it will be capped. And if it's to be designed and constructed by the administration, then the administration will consider or make reference to the cost. So that might happen from time to time, but then as the actual design and construction would be undertaken by the developer. So in the process, how are you going to ensure that the design will be able to achieve what you have in mind? So that, well, as many members have also referred to the traffic concerns and so on. So how are you able to address those issues? And also, as the present temporary RCP is also located in the site, and the location is near Sham Street. So basically, we're talking about the same site, even though the orientation might be somewhat different. So is there a time when this temporary RCP will go before the permanent RCP will come into play? So how are you going to arrange for the disposal of refuse then? Professor Chen, thank you, Dr. Low, for your two questions. In fact, all along, in terms of the cost of construction, that will be paid for by the government. But then in terms of the design, well, the government would be making this request to the developer, and the specifications will be very stringent, and they will have to do it to the satisfaction of the government before they are allowed to do it. And according to my understanding, in the design, well, the plans will have to be checked by the administration before they can use it. And also in terms of the planning and operation of the RCP, they will also have to act in accordance with Chapter 9 of the HKPSG, so that with regard to the layout and also the regulation of pollution, that would also be subject to the HKPSG. And also in constructing the RCP, well, after the temporary RCP is gone, then what is going to happen? We do have a temporary RCP, which is at the current location. So it measures about 300 square meters, and it will be relocated to Fuk Wing Street and the nearby vicinity. There is a temporary public car park, which will then house the temporary RCP, and of course the relocation cost will be about $1.1 million. Dr. Low? So can we see where the future temporary RCP is going to be on the map? Well, there are two parts. Well, for the temporary RC or refuse collection, I'll defer to the FEHD. But then Dr. Low asked how we can ensure that public money will be used properly, so that the actual expenditure will reflect the actual need. In the past, for similar projects, we also have the technical schedule. So we do have this technical schedule available, and we will also be telling the engineer that we will have to check some of the plans to make sure that they would meet the government's needs. And also, upon the development completion, the developer will also have to submit a statement checked by authorized persons that the costs are related to the government's works, and the government would also be checking those statements. And they will also have to furnish supporting documents to substantiate their claims that they are in line with our requests, and the public money spent will not be more than what is needed. And there is also a cap by $58.6 million. So that's the financial cap. So in determining the construction costs, we have also made reference to similar projects and their contractual costs. We would like to make sure that if the works have been undertaken by the administration, then the cost would be similar. So we can assure members that we will not be paying more. We will not be paying anything more to the contractor than is needed. So how can the FEHD explain to us what's the transitional arrangements? In enclosure 1, we have a layout plan. So the red box is the future proposed permanent RCP, and at present the temporary RCP would be in the box marked by the blue lines. And then what about the transitional arrangement? Well, part of it will be relocated, so that would be the part within the blue box will be relocated to the slanted red lines box. So the works have already started. So is it close to Sheung Wing building or what? It's close to the junction of Fuk Wing Street and Sham Street. Dr. Low, I think the explanation is still not clear, because if you look at the blue dotted lines, the boundary is the entire site that has been sold. So the site does not belong to you in the future, right? So there might be a period during which is so it's neither here nor there. So the new one has not been completed, but then the old one will be gone. So you talk about the transitional arrangement. So where is it going to be located then? Yes? Only part of it would be duplicating or overlapping with the site. So that's with the proposed permanent RCP. And that would overlap with the existing temporary one in the blue box. So that part will be surrendered first. As this part has been taken out from the whole site, so for the remaining blue site, that will continue to operate until such time when the new permanent one is completed, and then the remaining part in the blue area will be handed over to the developer. And then in the meantime, in the red box near the blue square boxes, that is the one near Fuk Wing Street, that will be used to replace the deleted part. In other words, the RCP can continue to operate until the new one is completed. Dr. Low, do you understand it? No, I don't. So is it that in the conditions of the lease, you have already said that the developer will have to set aside that land for you for temporary use? Or else I would find it difficult to understand. Well, Mr. Chen, you have raised your hand. So can you turn on the microphone? Well, let me supplement. In fact, in para 29, we have already explained that the future development of the land would be done in the form of a deferred handing over, so that the temporary RCP will not be handed over to the developer yet, so that we will wait until after the permanent RCP is in operation before the temporary RCP site would be handed over to the developer for development. So my understanding is correct. In other words, in the terms of the lease, you have allowed for this to be used as a temporary RCP in the meantime. Mr. Lang Kwok Hong, I'm interested in why the administration has to pay the developer after they have done the design and construction, and then the RCP will be handed back to the administration. The same happens for the XRL. So the MTRCL said that it would do the construction, but then the administration has given this financial guarantee, and then the MTRCL would charge the administration for the construction cost. So the question is, how do you monitor their work? So have you got the penalties clauses if they do not comply with your requirements? Professor Chen, Mr. Lang, what do you mean by the medication? Because para 10, well, let me read that out for you. The government will reimburse the developer the actual cost of design and construction, subject to a predetermined financial ceiling established with reference to the design and construction costs of the facilities as if they were to be designed and constructed by the government. Yes, correct. Okay, I know the words, but then I simply do not understand it. All right, the cost would not exceed the predetermined financial ceiling, so $58.6 million. So if the developer, let's say, spent $67 million. All right, if the actual cost incurred by me is $67 million, will you be reimbursing me that too? Well, as I said just now, well, we have already reached an agreement with them, and also in the design process, in fact, we would also be telling them what our needs are, and also what the existing resources are. So given that they would not be exceeding that cost ceiling, well, that applies to the XRL too. Point taken. Mr. Leung, earlier on, Chairman, please do not stop me. Well, initially, Mr. Wai was here, and he said the same. And I said that I do not trust you in your Liantang project. He said that, well, Mr. Leung, you don't know it. So, in fact, I've already stopped other members asking the same questions because I said that these are technical issues and you don't know them. All right, something untoward has happened for the XRL project. So can you tell this council, all right, once we have given you the financial funding, so whatever happens with the developer, all right, he might have come up with a very luxurious facility. Still, we will not have to reimburse him, right? You said that he will be responsible for the design and construction, and you will only be reimbursing him what is needed. So, are you telling him that? Are you telling the developer that the funding will be kept, and when you dig into the ground, if you find that it's hard rock, then you cannot ask for more? So, can you confirm if it's true? So, please do not engage in a dialogue with Mr. Leung. You will have to speak through the chair. Deputy Secretary or Under Secretary. Well, I'll ask the Principal Assistant Secretary to supplement. Thank you, Chairman. In fact, as far as government departments are concerned in implementing this project, well, in fact, the cost would not be less than what we would spend if it were undertaken by us. We have the technical specifications which would regulate the developer, and we would also say that this is the cap of the cost. And Mr. Leung is concerned that for the $58.6 million, if there is a cost overrun, what is going to happen? I can supplement that for the cap, we will be acting in full accordance with this cap. And for the 10% contingency fee, well, assuming that the specification and the requirement after the sale of land, if there are any changes, then we would be using that, or else we would not be using the 10% contingency cost. So if members are concerned about whether public money would be used properly or whether there is a cost overrun, you might be over worried. Mr. Leung? Well, the last sentence of para 10 reads like this. I can read that out again.
I'll do this for the benefit of people watching television. With reference to the design and construction costs of the facilities as if they were to be designed and constructed by the government, you have done your calculation and it should be okay within 500 or 550 odd million dollars. Is that right? If it were done by government, it would just cost that kind of money. Is that right? Yes, yes. Okay, I'll ask you again. If there is budget overrun, who will foot the bill? Under Secretary, well, actually, as my colleague said, in the agreement and also during the contract period and also when the design is available, we will check it before work can start. So there will be no question of budget overrun and then we are forced to pay up. In terms of budget control, we will have dealt with it at the initial design stage. Okay, I have already heard you. I'm just asking you whether that would be written into the contract. Mr. Leung, please wait for a second round. Mr. Wong Kwok Hing. Thank you, Chairman. About this paper, I support the project. First, the permanent RCP would be situated at the corner of Fuk Wa Street and Sham Street. I think that is a better site. As you can see, it will face the telephone exchange and the CLP Power Sham Shui Po Center. I have lived in Sham Street. I know the vicinity there very well. Now a temporary RCP would be reprovisioned as a permanent one. I think it is appropriate and it will convenience residents in the vicinity. Whether we're talking about the roads and the impact, I think efforts have been made to reduce the nuisance to the minimum, so I think the location is appropriate. Secondly, I think the administration has to answer a question, and that is, when you ask the developer to do the design and construction, are you going to require negative pressure design? I ask this question because in North Point on Chet Chim Wui Road, there is this permanent RCP. I was a member of the district council then, and I was very concerned. At that time, I was not in LegCo yet. It was a permanent RCP, and if it is situated in the same place as private developments, you should have negative pressure design so the odor will not escape out of the RCP. Talking about the RCP on Chet Chim Wui Road, there is this negative pressure design, so there is no odor that disturbs the residents. I was a district councillor and an urban councillor, and I applauded the design. And residents did not complain about the RCP at all. And it's quite welcome. People just don't know that it is an RCP, this one at Island Place. Therefore, I'm asking you about the design of this permanent RCP at Fuk Wa Street and Cam Street, that you should do the same as the one in Island Place on Chet Chim Wui Road. If you have not done this already, you should learn from the good example of the RCP in Island Place. Okay, Undersecretary, will you factor in the negative pressure design as proposed by Mr. Wong Kwok Heng in the technical schedule? Thank you for the question. We are very concerned about odor control as well. The air handling system will be there. There will be a mechanical ventilation system. There will also be ultraviolet light in order to control odor. As for negative pressure, could I please defer to the PAS? Yes, we have sought an understanding with the professional departments. Normally speaking, we don't use negative pressure systems in RCPs, but members can rest assured we have already got a good enough system for the RCPs. In fact, given present-day technology, this is very much used at RCPs and is very effective in tackling the odor problem at RCPs. Mr. Wong Kwok Heng? Well, you may talk about the general design and also the dripping mechanism. I understand it because I have worked in the Urban Council for many years, but I don't think it is enough. I am now formally asking the administration to consider my proposal just now, and that is at the Fuk Wing Street, Cam Street permanent RCP. You should take reference from the RCP at Island Place on Chet Chim Wui Road in North Point, because that is designed by a private developer. And I think that when private developers do the design, they will certainly consider the possible nuisance that may be caused to residents and, of course, the sale of the flats. They are very much into this, and it is a desirable thing for the developer to be designing it because they will certainly come up with more advanced designs than the government. So please record this. I would ask that there should be negative pressure design. Ms. Diane Wong, why don't you also comment on this? Why is it that your professional departments did not propose or propose not to have a negative pressure design? Well, we have heard the member. We can take this back for further consideration, but you must understand that this has a cost implication. If we want to do something, first of all, we have to look at the cost and then the cost effectiveness. You may issue the land sale conditions, and afterwards, if you want to revise them, then you will have to tap into the 10% contingency, but then the contingency amount might not be enough. So we would go back and consider this, and maybe before the Finance Committee meeting, we can have other thinking, and perhaps we can have a replacement system that can also give us the same effect of a negative pressure system. Just one word. I hope that the permanent RCP at Chechimui Road, which is a very successful example, can be looked into. At that time, we did not have the FEHD, but we had the Urban Services Department. At that time, we were told that that would be a very good design, and it was promoted to us, telling us that it would certainly be successful. Ms. Wong, you mentioned the land sale conditions. You said that those had been decided. Is that right? Is that the case? No, they had not been determined. But as the Undersecretary said, the handing over of the RCP and also the other technical details are now being circulated to departments. We need to have the funding support from FC before we can really decide on the land sale conditions. That is why we said we could go back and look at all these views, and where possible, we can adopt such a system or a replacement system. For the sake of the record, my understanding of your reply, Ms. Wong, is that the negative pressure design is a better one. It is just that it may be more costly. This is my understanding. To facilitate our ensuing discussion, is my understanding correct? Because members can then ask more questions on that basis. Undersecretary, you'd like to comment? Mr. Wong has cited a successful example using a negative pressure system. Our professional departments have already looked at the water scrubber system as mentioned by the PAS. Mr. Wong is saying that the system he mentioned is a very good one, but I think the professional departments need to look at it. Maybe the ASD can comment. Mr. Wong? Thank you, Chairman. I think we need to balance between such a system and the OSH of staff at the RCP, because if it is a negative pressure system, then staff who work there would be taking in the exhaust all the time. So we have to balance this. And actually, we would allow developers to use replacement or alternative systems. Let us have some flexibility there. Chairman, just one word for clarification. I can't agree with Mr. Wong, the chief architect, because even if you have a negative pressure system, it will not damage the health of RCP staff who will be inhaling a lot of exhaust. That is wrong. The negative pressure system means it will take away the exhaust, and then it will be taken away from the RCP through another exit. So there will not be any damage to RCP staff. Actually, the Island Place successful example is an example of the Urban Council, not my own. Okay, please be very brief because it has overrun already. If we have to balance this with OSH of the staff, the ventilation outlet should be at a lower spot, and the design may be more costly, and we have to think about this. Ms. Emily Lau, Chairman, nobody welcomes an RCP, but it is an essential facility. If you can make proposals that can secure support, you should do it. Who wants an RCP in your backyard? I hope the administration can do its best so residents will not complain. And I'm talking about odor and maybe environment nuisance and also noise. If you can do a good job, then when you propose to build other RCPs, you will not meet up with so much resistance. You talked about cost effectiveness. I would say if it means spending more for better results and residents will not be so resistant, I think we should go for it. Very often you want to hold on to your purse strings, but people are crying foul and then the problem remains. So go back and take an overall look. When the RCP is up and running, of course, we must be mindful of the health of the staff working at the RCP. So you have to give this overall consideration. If you want to plow in more resources, even if there should be a bigger contingency fee, so that you can resolve the problem, and if the design is a good one, I'm sure the FC will support you. So Undersecretary, do this with a free hand. And if indeed residents think that it's quite okay because they just don't know it is an RCP, then you can go to every other district in the future and there will not be any controversy. It is not that the residents are stirring up trouble. It is just that they object if there is a nuisance and a big one. We should consider the money side, but you should allow people to live and work happily, and we have to pay for it. Undersecretary, please consider this. When you come back to the FC, I hope you can reply to all these points, including staff health. My question is, Chairman, will there be any mechanism, because you say you will report back to the District Council at the appropriate time, but if indeed residents at the site think that this is not to be acceptable, then how can they make the complaints or comments known to you at the appropriate time? Undersecretary, thank you, Ms. Lau, for the question. At the site now, there is already an RCP. It is just that we are going to reprovision it to a nearby location on the same site. We have not been receiving complaints from the public about the present RCP. The future RCP will be more modern because we are trying our best to minimize nuisance that may be caused. Initially, we will report to the District Council at the appropriate time. And secondly, if there is a complaint, the FEHD will deal with it immediately. Maybe I can ask the Assistant Director to say something. PAS, Ms. Lau, you can rest assured we will not wash our hands of the project after it is completed. Just like last time, Ms. Ann Chang mentioned another case, there was some concern from the residents, and we wrote to reply to the panel and members. With regard to completed projects, if we find that there are problems, we will take a series of measures, and in fact, residents did not complain anymore.
So we will adopt the established approach. So we'll deal with their complaints very seriously. So for the issues that I just raised, I hope that when they go to the FC, they would come up with a supplementary paper so that you have taken a comprehensive look, and then you will come up with the best option for the residents and also for the financial arrangements. You will have to address those issues. Ms. Sito, Chairman. With regard to the planning of the site right now, if it does not include the RCP in the land sale, if you just sell the middle part of it, then so that the development project will only have two sides facing the street. But then once you have included the RCP, then that would be included as part of the development project. Then does it mean that the future development project will have three sides fronting the street? And if that is the case, then what's the plot ratio? If there are only two sides fronting the street, and if it's a three-side fronting street project, then what's the plot ratio? Can you answer the question, Deputy Secretary? In fact, at the panel meeting last time, some members have also raised the issue, and right away, we provided a written reply to members. In fact, if you look at the whole site, in fact, three sides would be fronting the street, because according to the buildings, i.e. Cap 1, 2, 3F, so you will have to have specified streets of no less than 4.5 meters wide. Then that would be considered a Cat C project. But then in the OCP, for this particular site, with regard to the residential building, the plot ratio, and also for the non-residential part, the plot plot ratio have been provided for very clearly. That's why the development will follow that guideline. And if it's to be built as a residential building, then the plot ratio shall not be in excess of 7.5. If there are also non-residential part, then the total plot ratio should not exceed 9. And then for the RCP, the plot ratio would also have to be taken into account as part of the non-residential development. What's the difference between having 2 sides fronting the street and 3 sides fronting the streets? So what's the difference in plot ratio between the two developments? Well, I can supply the information afterwards. In fact, under CAP 123F, there is some information. I don't have that with me now. Well, the reason why I am asking this, that's because for the RCP, well, in any case, you will have to relocate it. So in approving or in selling this site off, all right, there are 2 options. So you can increase the plot ratio by having 3 sides facing the street, or you can just sell the center part, and then the plot ratio would be lowered. So what I'd like to get is, given the fact that the administration has sold the RCP site to the developer so that the plot ratio would go up, in fact, for the $50 million plus, should it have been included in the land lease, and it should have been paid for by the developer, because under the arrangement, the plot ratio has been relaxed. The reason why I've asked this question, because when we look at Grand Promenade in the past, it also involved a similar process. In fact, after the land sale, the site has been sold off to the developer, and then the government approached the developer and they tried to include a temporary access, and then they would have 3 sides facing the street, and as a result, the property price went up. All right, you're talking about a supply of residential units. All right, if it's an advance arrangement for this to be done, that's acceptable, but then we will have to clarify. That is, before the site is sold, has the arrangement been put in place, or is it that this arrangement has only come into play after the sale of land? We will have to clarify that. And if that's the arrangement, and if you are able to increase the plot ratio to 7.5 and 9 respectively, then for the $50 million, should it have been paid for by the developer instead of using public money for this? Chairman, for the RCP, well, that has nothing to do with achieving 3 sides facing the street. In fact, if you look at the site boundary, they've already got 3 sides facing the street. So they have been subjected to the plot ratio as provided for under the OCP. We also understand the experience from Grand Promenade. That's why in coming up with the construction plot ratio. Sorry, speaker's not coming through. You should not be holding on to the microphone. The mic will not be running away, so you don't have to hold on the You don't have to hold the microphone when you speak. So it's not because of the RCP that the project has become having 3 sides facing the street. And therefore, the RCP has not resulted in an increase in the plot ratio. In fact, the plot ratio has been regulated by the OCP. We also are aware of the experience in Grand Promenade. That's why in coming up with a plan, we have already talked to the FEHD and also the planning department. We understand that the RCP will have to be calculated as part of the non-residential development. That's why we are not going to repeat the experience in Grand Promenade, resulting in an inflation in the plot ratio. Well, looking at the layout plan here, all right, for the pink part and also the layout plan with the blue boxes, for the existing RCP is on the part with the blue boxes, so it's on one side of the site. That one is a temporary one. It's a temporary RCP. So, just a minute. In fact, the blue boxes are the existing RCP. Yes, it's the existing RCP. Okay, so can I ask the administration to tell us between the 2 choices? So for the 900 square meters of the RCP, if it's to be taken out from the site, and if you just sell the 2,250 square meters, so what is the consideration? Why have you taken that choice? All right, in the paper, you said that you would like to optimize the use of the site, but then we'd like to get more practical data. So if the RCP is not included, what's the plot ratio? And if it's included, what's the plot ratio? We'd like to know the difference. Next, Leung Chi-Chang. Thank you, Chairman. This is an essential project because it's important that the RCP is reprovisioned, and it would also help the residents in the neighborhood. Despite the fact that I would support this project, well, looking at earlier experience, I'd also like to say this to the administration. Well, in Yuen Long, there was a project which was constructed by a private developer, and then it was handed back to the government afterwards. But then it's somewhat different from this because it's part of the land lease. But then in this case, you're paying them, and then they would be asked to do it. But then in that case, well, there was seepage on the rooftop, but then as it's already after the warranty period, so the land has been sold, so nothing can be done about it. So it was a market, it's the Tong Yik market in Yuen Long. And it also has to do with the undersecretary. So you have tried to help it, but then the problem was not resolved. So I'd like to bring this up for the administration's consideration. In taking over the building, you will have to check to see if there are any problems, or else the consequence will have to be borne by you. So you will be paying them, and still you will be bearing the consequence. I'd like to look at the Sham Shui Po District Council. All right, they have reached 6 points of consensus with you, and if you look at those, the consensus is very important. But then at this meeting, I don't know if the panel members have raised this, because I'm not a panel member. But then you will also have to provide further information to this council. In particular, you have already sold a lot to them, and they are going to build this building for you. And of course, in the future, it's you who will be running or managing the place. But then the site does not belong to you. So the district council has already raised this. All right, you will have to clarify the boundary, or else there will be a lot of problems. Because earlier on, they had a similar experience, and that was the old one near Lipo Garden. Well, I was late in joining the meeting. I don't know if you have explained that to members already. Well, for the RCP, the district council was very concerned about this. And they said that in principle, they were not against the relocation. In other words, there were many members who were against, and of course, there were some members who were in support. So what I'd like to know is, for those who are opposed to this, what are their justifications? So can you provide that to us? Thank you. Undersecretary, thank you, Mr. Leung, for your question. Well, let me answer the second question first. For the district council, I think the main thing was at the district council, when they discussed the issue, well, the RCP might cause some nuisance to the residents. So mainly the district council was concerned about this. That's why, as we have set out in enclosure 3, there were 6 points of agreement. So in due course, we will be reporting to the Sham Shui Po District Council as to the progress of the works. In the design, we have also done something. For example, at the entrance, and also the route that would be completely segregated from the residential part of the site. So people do not have to worry that in entering the estate, they will have to go through the RCP. For the ingress and egress point of the RCP, that would be completely segregated from the residential development, and also for air quality, sewage, and so on. That would also be dealt with. So what about the DMC on the boundaries of the land? Sorry? Because the site belongs to the developer, so it's to be handed back to the government for use. So on the DMC, so what about the boundaries of the land? What is the title of the land? Deputy Secretary, as the Undersecretary has said, the facilities will be completely segregated. In fact, we have also looked at the DMC. There will be a very clear definition of the RCP as well as the boundary for the residential development. So there would be undivided shares for the residential development. We are still looking at the DMC, and after listening to members' views, in preparing the DMC, we will factor this in. Mr. Leung. Next, Ann Chiang. Thank you, Chairman. Well, just now some members have said that the most important thing is that near the residential development, if you have RCPs, definitely there would be different views about whether they want it there. So at Fuk Wa Street, Fuk Wing Street, again, they're going to have this RCP. In fact, we have also asked the residents nearby. Basically, the residents welcome this. They welcome it because the existing RCP is a temporary one. That's why it's in open air. So when summer comes, there will be a lot of mosquitoes and flies and so on. The refuse collection vehicles would be lining up out there, and is on Fuk Wing Street, and Fuk Wing Street has a lot of residential buildings, and they are suffering a lot right now. In particular, during summer, the odor and also hygiene problems have been bothering them. So, in the future, would that be, if it's to be made an indoor one, that would also be welcomed by the residents. We also understand that in the design, the entrance would be on Fuk Wa Street instead of Fuk Wing Street. So residents would accept it because opposite Fuk Wa Street, you have the CLP power center and also the telephone exchange. Well, for the offices, they would mainly be operating during daytime, and many of the facilities would be enclosed, and therefore they would not be subject to the nuisance of the RCP, and the residents would also not have to face the RCP. But residents nearby are concerned about two things. One, in the future DMC, would you repeat the problem of Lipo Garden? That is another residential development whereby the owners and the government had a dispute about the management fees, because as we all know, well, for workers who have processed or disposed of the garbage, that would they would just drain the sewage water into the drains, and then that would give rise to pest problems and so on. And as a result, the management fees have to go up. But then the government was not willing to take up part of the cost. So I'd like to ask the Undersecretary and the officials to deal with this properly. And residents are also concerned about the management by the FEHD.
Okay. The design may be similar, but it is important for FEHD to do the management. Like in Hoi Lai Estate, the management is okay, even if there are complaints every now and then, but basically residents find that to be okay. But in Yuen Chao Estate, there are more complaints. I think you should step up management. Overall speaking, we support this project. We think you should get on with it as soon as possible. The uncovered RCP is making too much nuisance to the residents. Last but not least, I'd like to ask you how you can propose management of the RCP, which will be in a private development. Undersecretary, thank you, Ms. Chang. We have some options. As Mr. Leung was saying, we are studying the DMC. We'll certainly delineate the responsibilities of the government and the developer very clearly. Maybe the PAS can add. PAS? Indeed, whether it be the vehicle access, sewage treatment, and the pedestrian exit, etc., all that is totally separated from the residential part. You talked about the drains and sewage drains. They will be totally separated from those for the residential units. And in the DMC, since everything is separated, we are going to only take up the management fees of the part of the property under our management. Ms. Chang, any follow-up? Will you consider doing more? Because after all, this is an obnoxious facility and it is situated on the ground floor. Will you consider taking up more of the management fees? Undersecretary, we will delineate our responsibilities clearly, and there will be professionals who will draw up those boundaries. Mr. Tony Jiang, Chairman. we are forming a bigger site with the vicinity, so that now we have a site of almost 35,000 square feet, so we can produce more residential units. I support that in principle. But we are also concerned that there is going to be this RCP. You must consider its design very carefully. As the developer, it will certainly minimize the environment nuisance that will be caused by the RCP to a very minimum. My concern is actually with the government. You have to write things down clearly so the developer must follow the clauses. However, if it is not written well, even if the developer wants to do a good job, it cannot. So please talk to your technical departments. And it is not just about this site. There may be similar situations in the future if you can make a good start. In other words, factor in future possibilities into the design. The developer, of course, would like to minimize nuisance so that the impact can be reduced to zero. This is what developers would always want to do. And however, if the contract is such that you tie our hands so that we cannot do it well, then it's not going to be good. Please spend time on it because it will have a long-term impact. And then operation and management. That is important as well. The FEHD must do a good job. We're all worried about the writing of the DMC, and all that is important. So please do not treat it lightly. Do not just sell the land and think that that's the be-all and end-all. Be careful in considering every aspect. And as I said, this will not be an isolated case. It's going to be an example for the long term. Some members are concerned about the technical side, but we are not having any technical staff here. Should the RCP face 1 street, 2 streets, or 3 streets? Let us look at Kowloon Peninsula and the Hong Kong Island separately. On Kowloon is 7.5, but if you face 2 streets, 3 streets, it has an impact on the coverage. But then on Hong Kong Island, the ratio would be different. It would be 8 times, 9 times, or 10 times. Don't just take my word for it, but I'm just sharing with you my knowledge. I hope you understand this point. You quoted a Kowloon example and a Hong Kong example, but Chairman, those are not analogies. Last but not least, we asked many questions, and our concern is that the government departments, the technical ones especially, must carefully consider the design requirements and future operation. I believe you are talking about undivided shares, because the land will not be excised for you because it will lead to very complicated situations. So look at it carefully, and you have this in the land sale conditions, and once the land is sold, the conditions are going to stay. I would be worried that you don't give it ample consideration. For the design, I hope you will not just use a traditional design. You have to be forward-looking. There will be a big role for these RCPs to play in the future, for example, separating waste at source. And like Mr. Frankie Yik said, you should put in more facilities while trying to minimize nuisance. I think before the land is auctioned or sold, the government must work very hard on this. And when you come to the Finance Committee, you have to provide the information to reassure us. Undersecretary, thank you very much, Mr. Jia, for reminding us of all these points. We thank you for your views on the design, and we will certainly be careful. Some members have also said that the design should be forward-looking, that the design should also seek to minimize nuisance. Your view is that it should not tie the hands of the developer, but we should be mindful about the cost as well. We intend to keep to that spending ceiling. And then management by FEHDs, yes. After the RCP is made permanent, the operation and management will be done by the FEHD. We'll certainly be careful about that. PAS, we work very closely with the professional departments on the technical schedule. We understand that from a business point of view, the developer may not situate public facilities in the best place. But we have talked to the ASD and we are going to ask for the plans. There shouldn't be load-bearing pillars in the middle of the RCP, so RCVs cannot have turning space. So we are going to look at the technical schedule very carefully. Mr. J's advice is that you should not tie the hands of the developer, because from the point of view of the developer, it will certainly want to make the RCP quite invisible, because that will be best for the unit prices. So he is only asking you to provide some latitude, and this will be recorded. And when it comes to a value for money study in the future, perhaps the discussion today may be useful. Sitho, I'd like to thank Mr. Tony Jia for sharing with us his professional knowledge. We could only learn from the experience of previous scandals. The PAS is telling us that she has learned from experience and would try to prevent a recurrence. That is to a certain extent reassuring. But I would ask you, for the entire procedure, is it that you are going to sell the land together with the RCP or without the RCP? What are your considerations for selling a site of 2,250 square meters or 3,170 square meters? And where in the land sale conditions will you include such conditions? Do you already have a buyer of the land in mind? Would you talk to the potential buyer first before you sell the land? Learning from the experience of the Grand Promenade, you must be careful about the procedure. But no matter what the procedure is, the government is going to foot the bill and the developer is going to build the facility. I think that is not an ideal way of doing it, because you can in fact do a tendering exercise and you can go for a lower bid if you try to build a facility like this. Of course, the paper says that you will not have to be responsible for any budget overrun, but then the trend is for building costs to go up. I think this is not a desirable way of working. If you put the RCP into the land sale conditions and the developer is required to build an RCP to the satisfaction of the requirements, well, the developer can do it with a lower cost, so he can be said to be smart. And in fact, you can also ask him for a negative pressure system. And why don't you consider it this way? Or is it that you have other justifications for going for this way of working? It's just that you did not talk about it in the paper. Under Secretary, Ms. Ho, well, we can write another paper to give an account of our consideration. But in fact, the land has not been sold, so we don't know who the developer is. Before we have policy and funding support, we cannot sell the land. And in fact, we can write a paper to tell you about the entire procedure. But our understanding is that when we went to the Sham Shui Po District Council, the DC proposed that the RCP should be reprovisioned so that we can form a larger site for the Development Bureau. This is part of the procedure. Okay, I will ask the Bureau to give me the details in a paper. Under Secretary, you have been here for over an hour and you have followed the discussion. You can see that the PWSC is very concerned about the measures you can adopt. You talk about the technical schedule, the ASD's plans, that there will be authorized persons who may make written representations to ensure that the reference material used for supporting this funding request will not be deviated from, but you have not been clear about how these measures and tools can address our concerns. The RCP is now going to be built by a private developer. How can you make use of those tools and measures to ensure that the policy direction and policy objective of the government will be implemented? I think members have been asking about this from different angles. Now, since this item will be singled out for voting at the Finance Committee, please give detailed answers to all those points in your supplementary paper. Any other questions? Chairman, the ASD would like to add. Okay, Mr. Wong. Thank you. Just one point. The ASD's role is the technical advisor for FEHD. We will not be responsible for the design. The design and construction of the RCP will have to comply with the building's ordinance. It is just like any private development. Yes, because you have mentioned so many things involving so many departments. So members of the PWSC have voiced this concern. Since you are going to rely on the successful bidder to build the RCP, there will be supplementary facilities, and also the government would like to achieve certain policy intent and policy objectives. So how can you make use of the tools and measures that you mentioned can deliver the policy objectives which have been decided? That is what we are asking. You can be brief in your answers, but the paper today cannot answer those questions. That is why many members have spoken up. Any more questions? If members have no other questions, I will put this item to the vote. Those in favor, hands up. Those against, please raise your hands. I think the question is supported by a majority of the members voting. The item is passed. After carrying this item, as I said, a member has requested that this item be singled out for voting at a Finance Committee that is not going to be held before the 8th of May. The next meeting would be on the 8th of April at 8:30 in the morning.
Ms. Lau, don't adjourn the meeting yet. We have received a paper, and 3 papers are supposedly have been tabled by or submitted by the papers. So PWSC number 1, 2, 3. Yes, that's for the next meeting. And the secretary said that well, those papers would be discussed at one of the future meetings. So that's the meeting to be held on the 8th of April, right? Yes, correct. So I didn't understand why she has put it that way. Probably she thought that we might not be able to finish today's meeting, right? Yes. So so at the meeting held on the 8th of April, we'll be discussing those 3 papers. Well, very rarely would I see the administration say that, well, those meetings will be discussed at one of our meetings. All right? Meeting is adjourned.